Hey everyone, so welcome back to WESIE Academy, aka www.wesieonline.com, coming to you live, your host, the founder of WESIE Academy, Funke Energy. So we're going to go straight into it today. So in the last video, I gave you an intro and set the scene for what we're going to talk about today. And this is about going beyond your statistics, going beyond your results. That's what we're talking about in these videos and these series. And like I said, the first video, there were some keywords that came out that I'm going to do some videos on based on the questions and everything that occurred in that video. So what I said we'd be talking about today is what actually breaks people. So we dealt with that. We spoke about identity. We talk about selectors being seen the right way. Now it's about how do you remain standing when things happen, because things will happen. And oftentimes, if you can't remain standing, you end up being broken. And we're going to try and fill that gap between who you think you are or who you thought you were and who you need to be in the next level. So remember, I spoke about transitioning and different levels of transitioning within sports. It's really important that you can stand when you're going through those transitions, because those transitions within sports oftentimes is what breaks people. And when people are broken, your performance is impacted. So to start off with, I'm going to just talk about a couple of warning signs. I think I've got four warning signs that I want you to be aware of. Being aware of them can limit their impact they have on you. This is also, I'm going to talk about my personal experience in this area as well, although it's some years ago from when I was an athlete. So, signs of actually being broken, or that you're going through a process where you're being broken and where you need to stop it so that your performance is not impacted, is if you only feel like yourself when you're performing well. So when you're having a good competition, a good game, you're getting, you're scoring points, you're winning you're scoring goals, you're having personal best, then you feel good, and I can identify with that because I remember, yes, you have a good game, you feel good about yourself, you feel on top of the world. But if you don't have a good game, and you don't have good stats, maybe you don't score as many goals as you weren't able to score personal best, didn't come within the first three in a race or what have you, then you just don't feel like yourself. You kind of just are not yourself. That's a sign. And if you continue on that path, then you will be broken, and that gap will get will stretch. The gap between who you think you are and who you need to be just widens. And the wider it becomes, the more harder it is to get back on track. And the harder it is to recover. So the chances are that's going to affect your next performance. The second warning sign to be aware of is your mood. Um, in my book, I wrote a bit about mental health amongst athletes. And for me personally, I think that I can say there was a number of times and seasons where I was going through short-term depression because my whole entire mood depended on the results that I got, the stats that I got. Sometimes I would come home crying because I hadn't had a good game. I hadn't achieved what I felt I could achieve, what I wanted to achieve. And maybe if you weren't selected, you have to remember, although we've spoken a lot, I spoke about how you're seen and trying to control that narrative so that selectors, those people selecting, see you in the way you need to be seen. You have to be strong and be able to stand still regardless of that, because whether or not you're chosen, it doesn't change who you are as a person. And a lot of times it doesn't change who you are as an athlete. People selecting scouts, coaches have to think about a number of things where they're selecting. It's not just about your talent, it's not just about who you are, especially in a team sport. So your mood, don't allow it to depend on the decisions other people are making. Then your ranking as well. So my mood often depended on those things. And if those things weren't in sync, I would feel broken. And when you're broken, like just like having a broken heart, sometimes people have relationships and oh well, something happens, you kind of go your separate ways, life goes on. But there are other times you literally feel brokenhearted because all your emotions, everything you have, you've invested in it, and things are not happening the way they should. The third warning sign is that you don't know who you are outside of sports. I mean, when I was an athlete, I felt like I ate, I breathed, I ate, I lived, for my sport. And I didn't really have much of a life, if I'm being honest, outside the sporting world. And that's not healthy. That's not healthy because if your entire being, your entire identity, and what moves you is based on your sport, which indirectly means it's based on your performance, then when things aren't going well, um, things are going to break down. And the sad thing is that when you allow those things and those warning signs to fester and you don't do anything about it, that gap between who you think you are and who you actually need to be at the level you are or at the level you're trying to go starts to become wider. It starts to stretch. And the wider that gap is, the harder it is to bring things back together and to get back on your path. And for a lot of athletes, that marks the beginning of the end of their career, except they do something about it, except they have the right people around them to guide and advise them, except they have something like WESIE Academy speaking to them. Things break down. They don't just break down the people, the person, the athlete doesn't just break down. Actual, their whole, the whole sports element of them starts to fall apart. And that's actually marked the beginning of the end for a lot of athletes. Don't let that be your story. Don't let that be your story. So, how do you prevent that from happening? How do you prevent yourself from being a victim of being broken as an athlete? How do you stop yourself from being broken? Because those things I've mentioned probably will happen. You will have bad games. You will have unexpected results. And the question is, how do you ensure that you remain standing regardless of all that? Um, you do that by building an identity that can travel with you wherever you go. You do that by building an identity that is independent of your role or who you are as an athlete. I'm going to talk about 4 key anchors that I believe will help you to do this. I think I'm going to talk about 2 because of time in this video. I told you I'm going to keep this video short and simple. So I'm going to talk about 2. And then in the closing video, I'll talk about the other 2. So the first of the 2 I'm going to talk about today is your values. What are your personal values? And there are 2 types of value for you as an athlete. You've got your personal values, and then you've got what should be your sporting values as an athlete. What is it you stand for, regardless of the outcome? Let me give you an example. So, there are some talented players that I sort of played with when we were coming up, that didn't feel they needed to be consistent in attending practice, because they felt they would be selected regardless. There were some talented players that, because they're very talented, in fact, there's a guy, I'm going to use this specific guy. This guy had everything it takes to be a professional ball player. He was one of those players that was playing in the club I was playing for at the time, that they had marked that, he was going to go college, and regardless of what happened, he was going to go pro. It's like it was made for him. When he got to college, his coaches believed in him, they felt the same, but he never made it pro. And he never made it pro because he just lacked the self-discipline to be committed, to do the right thing at the right time. And I actually blame the club I was at the time, because the thing is, when you allow players to show up to, play, to do whatever they want because they're talented, and you don't help them to develop and understand the importance of self-discipline, you're actually not helping them in the long term. And I think that was the case. That was the case with this guy. He got away with it for so long. He still managed to make college, even though he wasn't that disciplined. He still managed to get selected. So he was never going to be able to he didn't have what it takes to go pro because he didn't have the right values, the right personal values, and the right values as an athlete. A sports journey is about a career, and a career spans many decades, not just the short period whilst you're performing. So, and your habits are what make you, and your personal values as well as your sporting values. Now, there was now myself. I let me flip the script and use myself as an example. There were many times in many games that I didn't achieve what I set out to achieve, what I would have liked to achieve. There are many times I wasn't selected, but the reasons why I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve, the reasons why I didn't get selected had nothing to do with my personal values. It had nothing to do with my sporting values. And the reason I say that is because I always showed up, and I showed up on time, if not being the person there first, the first at practice, the most hardworking player in practice, and the most consistent. Yes, there were games I couldn't switch it on, because there were certain things that I didn't know that I know now, the mental aspect of the game, identity, making sure I'm being seen the right way. I didn't know all that as a player, but I had values. I had personal values. I had self-discipline. I was committed. I had self-discipline. I was hardworking. And I was all those things, regardless of the environment I was in. So when I was in the right environment, I got picked. I got my first professional contract. I didn't go through with the contract. That's a story for another day. But I got my first professional contract through just going to a tryout. But because I showed up, and that's because I had developed habits that were based on my own personal values and my values as an athlete. And that is why I'm still sitting here today. That's why I have WESIE and WESIE Academy, and that's why it's able to function because of those values. So, what am I saying? Values stand the test of time. Your personal values, your values as an athlete helps you to remain standing. It helps you to get up even when things are not going the way they should. And even though in my case, I felt there were times where my recovery took longer than it should because, I didn't know how to deal with a broken heart in sports, and even at a personal level, I think sometimes when you're younger, you don't really know how to deal with pain and emotional pain, and people deal with it in different ways. And some people never really recover. Some people, it takes a bit longer than others, but having values, personal values, and sporting values will help you to build that identity that travels with you. It will help you to transition successfully across levels, and it will help you to remain standing and to go the distance. So, your values, really important. The second thing is your relationships. Relationships in sports and outside sports are very important. And what do I mean by relationships? I don't just mean sporting relationships, people that just see you for your statistics and for your performance. That's what most fans see. Most fans care about what you're doing, your performance. Are you winning or losing? There are some people that don't want to associate with you because you're not playing well, what have you. But there are people out there that know you beyond the stats, beyond the results, beyond the medals, beyond the trophies. Those relationships are really important. And I think for me, having relationships with people outside sports is really important because, and even with your coaches, your teammates, but just people that can see you. And you also need to learn to be able to see people beyond the stats and beyond the results. There are teammates I have of mine that weren't necessarily the best players at the time. But over the years, I'm actually closer to some of those people than some of the players that were actually more talented and good players and players that I admired, and that we were friends at one point, but life took us on different paths. And and I've had learned over the years, and we've learned, I can see them beyond sports. I can see them beyond their talent level. And they've also come to see me beyond sports. And then there are people that I've had relationships that are outside the world of sports. And those relationships are very important to me because I know that those people don't just see me as Funke the athlete or Funke the founder of WESIE. They actually see who I am on a personal basis. Again, those relationships are really important in terms of helping to keep you standing. So it's about which we talk a lot more in some of the other videos I do, healthy relationships, etc. So within sports, your teammates, etc. You don't have to be best friends with the person doing well on the team. Yes, some would say, I know an athlete that told me, oh, when he goes to a new team, he marks out the people that, are, the right people, the people doing well, that, and gravitates towards them because it helps him, which is a good thing. But if you're to remain standing and you're to have an identity that goes beyond the stats, you need to build relationships based on your values, based on your personal values, the values of the other person, and that's what's going to help you to have a strong identity and to remain standing regardless of what happens. So I think I'm going to stop the video there because I know some of the things I've said are a bit deep. You might want to just take time to reflect on those things. When I come back in the next session, I'll deal with the other two anchors that I think are vital for your identity in sports beyond the stats, beyond the results, and that will enable you to stay standing. So, Funked Energy from WESIE Academy Live, aka www.wesionline.com. See you later, guys. I'll see you in the next session. Bye.